Welcome to the Elevate podcast. This series focuses on elevating and inspiring women and girls into or to remain in the tech sector from the classroom to the boardroom. I'm Kellie Kwarteng, founder and CEO of Hellzack and host of the show. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Women in Tech podcast. Today we are speaking to Evie Dineva, Head of Data Engineering and Data Science at Gymshark. In this role, Evie is the lead for data and AI, working closely with the business to help maximise the potential for their data assets and drive additional value for the business through insights and machine learning. Evie brings together a customer-focused solution background with experience working across data architecture, engineering, business intelligence, and AI. She is passionate about deriving commercial value from data assets through solving real-world business problems and pioneering the adoption of innovative technologies and ways of thinking. Evie, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you in more detail.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to kick things off, it's the way I start with pretty much everybody that I have on the show. Can you share a bit about your background, what led you to the role that you are today, and a little bit of detail about that role that you're doing over at Gymshark?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of sort of came into data from a very untraditional background. So I did clinical biochemistry at university. I suppose I dealt with data, but it was very much from a statistics perspective in the context of drug development. And if you'd asked me about kind of 8 to 9 years ago, what I'd be doing data and technology and programming in any shape or form, I would have probably laughed because it's the last thing that I thought I'd be doing. I always found it very sort of hard to do, very mathematically driven and therefore way beyond my scope and what I could do. But actually over time, and as I jumped into my graduate role, I worked for a company which produced the software as a service solutions for the NHS. And I learned to lean into my domain knowledge around healthcare and actually position myself as someone who's got the aptitude and attitude to learn. And a role became available in the data space, which I just found really interesting and curious. And I wanted to understand how I can apply my domain knowledge and my skills in a completely different field. So I took on the challenge to upskill myself and understand how I can utilize data to drive commercial value for our business in the context of healthcare and improve outcomes for patients and citizens and clinicians. And that's really how I jumped into that space. And I suppose since then, just really my passion for how we can use data, not just to understand what's happened, but contextualize insights into a business, but also potentially even proactively understand what could happen. So spanning into data science and machine learning to then drive kind of a view of the future to better inform our decision makings, to inform our business strategies as well. I find that field massively fascinating, and I really think that that's where the future is going and the value will be for any business out there. So I suppose my role into Gymshark is very much looking to that, into that lens, is we're trying to lay the foundations from a data engineering and architecture perspective to allow us to really utilize data from an insights and data science perspective to understand how we can make more proactive decisions, understand our customers and market base better, and ultimately provide them with better customer journeys and better products for them as well.
I love the fact that you've come from that non-traditional background. I think so many people, particularly women, think I can't have this career, this role in tech because I didn't start in tech. And that transition from biochemist to head of data engineering at Gymshark. and I think it just proves that, you know, that potential, given that passion and that drive, and like you said, that passion to use your domain knowledge has really enabled that transition across. So love that. And I love that that's something that you've been able to go on and do. So as a leader in the data engineering role that you've got over at Gymshark, what unique perspective do you feel that you bring to them as a woman in tech?
I suppose two aspects for me. So I love what I do, and when I say that is I always say that I don't just say this. For me, I do a job, but actually I found an area that I feel very passionate about. I believe that's where the future is for any business. And going into work every morning and kind of logging in doesn't even feel like a job sometimes, which is I'm very fortunate. And I think anyone that finds the something that they enjoy doing to be doing this on a daily basis for the rest of their lives is a very fortunate person, actually. So being passionate about what I do, really wearing my heart on my sleeve and leaning into my emotions as a woman and empathy has really springboarded me to be where I am as quickly as I have. Not just in terms of sort of understanding and wanting to deliver value for the business, but also for me, it's very important to be people focused as well. So I was given the opportunity to create my own team as I grew into my career and look after other people. And I think that's been very beneficial for myself as a leader to grow into this space, but also I always try and pay it back because I've had brilliant people who've supported me. And actually using my emotions, my empathy to understand the people that I work with, my peers, but also the people that are my direct reports as individuals as well as in their professional capacity. It's just helped me kind of build that culture in the teams that I've had and of collaboration and really forward thinking and openness, I suppose. The other side of things for me is I suppose you can look at it from a kind of advantage and a disadvantage bringing this side of into a business. But for me, it's been bringing in the level of impatience and drive. And sometimes leaning into that impatience to really drive a project or our vision forward into the data space. I suppose where I'm trying to, and I'm still working on this, is really understand when to lean on it for the right reasons. To drive our vision forward as a business, to really utilize data to be more commercially driven, but also be more pragmatic in situations where I need to make more I suppose, level decisions about when we need to stop and take a step back and reflect and learn from a particular situation or particular project that hasn't gone well.
I love that you spoke about that you love what you do, and I think that plays such a huge part in the roles and how well we perform in our jobs. And that passion and what you talked about, that kind of that legacy, that people focus, and I know it's something that we spoke about, and we're going to talk about it later in this episode. Secret sauce that I think it's a secret sauce that you have, because if you can create those really true people focused, being that authentic leader, then the work output and the productivity that you will get from your teams is absolutely huge. So I love that you identify that as a strength as a woman and what you bring in your role over at Gymshark. As a woman in tech then, obviously you've worked in the tech industry now for a little while, starting off in the NHS and then moved over to Gymshark. I know that you worked at a consultancy, I think, as well. What challenges have you faced as a woman in the tech space, and what advice do you have for other women needing to overcome challenges like this?
I think at the start of my career, the main challenges were around kind of being in a very male-dominated environment, and I suppose a lot of people still see that as a bad thing, or they feel that this is it's not a great position to be in. But actually, at the time, and I'd still say this to this day, I've learned a lot from being surrounded in rooms where I had data engineers or software engineers or data and technology people that were predominantly male, because they also bring their unique perspective on how they'd approach a situation. And whilst it took some time for me to find my voice and feel that confidence that I was able to speak up, I suppose I was fortunate enough to be in a company, in an environment that allowed me to have that safe space and created that for me. But also it allowed me to observe how even in a male-dominated environment, actually, there's a lot to learn about how people challenge each other constructively, how they approach different problems from a technology or programmatic perspective. So I think whilst it's still perceived that this is a problem. And yes, we all want to see a lot more women in technology. At the time and in the beginning of my career, and probably still to this date, I try to see this and try to look at it from a positive lens and actually learn from others who have that experience and expertise and their different points of view in those scenarios. Over time, as someone that was kind of fairly young when I stepped into this field as well, the kind of I've had issues, I suppose, and challenges around being labeled as not as knowledgeable, or ageism has sort of become an issue as well. But I think that, again, for me, and I know it's very difficult, for some women it could be quite difficult, but I've tried to look at it from a positive perspective and actually lean into this, as opposed to see it as this is a problem. Ultimately, I can't change how old I am or how much experience I have. The only thing I could do is work on this myself and upskill myself outside of my usual kind of working hours, to really understand what is it that I could do to better myself over time and gain that respect of others and peers in situations that I'm in. And I think a lot of women still experience that. I suppose for me, the thing that we need to help each other on is not necessarily kind of point fingers at others in those situations, but really reflect within and think, what can we do? What's within our control to change the way that we are perceived? What can we do to feel more confident, to better ourselves? And sometimes that happens by self-reflection and really driving your own self-development. And sometimes that can be supported by other women in technology who've, kind of trodden the path and experienced such situations in their career as well. But I think that it's important to not victimize ourselves in such situations and really be strong, reflect on what we can do and what we can control, and bring that unique perspective and better ourselves in such situations.
Really like that response, and it's interesting. I interviewed someone on a previous episode, and they raised that point of being in that male-dominated environment. Obviously, most scenarios most women are going into, that's kind of just how things are, because the numbers are where they are, so you can't instantly change that. But how to explain getting comfortable being in those uncomfortable situations and learning how to speak up, have that voice, bring others on that journey with you and everything else. So I really like your response.
No, absolutely. And I think, Kellie, it's important to say that not everyone kind of naturally, that confidence doesn't come naturally to everyone, right? But I think then it's our responsibility as women, as I mentioned before, that are a bit further ahead in their career, to support others and help them build that confidence over time, because I think we all have it within us. Some of us maybe feel a bit more ready than others in different stages of their lives to speak up and be comfortable that they'd be heard and listened to in these situations as well.
Yeah, 100%. And that's that whole mentorship piece, working with people who've already faced those challenges that potentially you're going through. So, I always say to people that I've worked with, women that I've worked with, is try and seek out, what is your challenge? What is it you're trying to overcome? What is your goal that you're trying to achieve? And then find that mentor, reach out to people that potentially can help you achieve that. And don't feel like you can't reach out to people, because 9 times out of 10 they want to help you. And it's a really kind of supportive environment. So yeah, I like your tips there in terms of overcoming challenges. If we move forward and if we was to look into the future, what changes would you like to see in the tech industry to make it a more inclusive and welcoming place for women?
I think the awareness piece is really important. And I think more and more out there, we're seeing that awareness, and businesses are more actively working on their diversity and inclusion programs, specifically trying to attract female talent into different roles across tech, but outside of tech as well, I'd say, in leadership positions. I think I always tend to think about these things from a kind of one individual perspective. I think there's a self-reflection piece that needs to happen first. Like, every single person, irrespective of what department they're based in, probably needs to kind of reflect within themselves and think about the unconscious biases that we come in with sometimes, because the way we, in my experience, the way we interview, the way we advertise for roles, or the person we have in mind tends to have a particular character or things that we look for outside of simple sort of skills perspective. And I think that starting with that self-awareness at an individual level of, am I actually bringing a level of unconscious bias when I'm hiring individuals, when I promote, when I'm building up my team? It's really important because it starts with one person and it grows over time. I think strategies from a business perspective are very important, but for me, the action is where things come into life and really shape. And I think the action needs to be driven by each of us, irrespective of what business we're in, irrespective of whether we're female or male, or whether we're sitting in the technology department or outside of it. Just really reflecting on how we support others, irrespective of their gender, how we recruit, how we build teams and grow them and promote others, I suppose. And then thinking on what can you do. So again, you can only control what you could do, but even if mentoring one individual through their journey helps them step up into a different position, grow within their role, or maybe change roles and build that confidence, to me, that is more of a change than just talking about it, I suppose. So I'd like to see more individuals, not just females, but males and females, mentor others on their career journeys, really help them not just understand what's out there in terms of the roles and expectations and responsibilities, but also help them build their character and understand how they can grow as a person. And that in turn will help you grow professionally, from my perspective as well. And a lot of time I've joked with my mentors that they feel a bit like my counselors, but that's because mentorship is a lot more, in my eyes, than just, I'm going to help you on your career growth. Sometimes growth is personal and your character, and that translates into a career progression or change as well. So starting with yourself, I would say, is what I would like to see. If we all did that, I think the change will happen on a much larger scale than just kind of doing these kind of strategies at a company level. That's important. That gives you that awareness piece. For the action, I think starts with a single person.
Yeah, love that. That self-awareness. Couldn't agree more on the mentorship side of things. Obviously, we've just launched our mentorship program here at Elevate Women in Tech. But I think understanding the privilege that you have, be it man or woman, and then paying that forward is so valuable. And I think you're 100% right. Strategies and big DEI plans within companies is important and it needs to be there, but it doesn't actually come alive unless the individuals are truly believing in it and ready to make some change. And I think if everyone took one initiative every day or once a month, once a week to do something different, then we'd start to see huge changes for all in all areas. A topic that comes up a lot, and I know it's a topic that you're quite passionate about as well for women in tech, is imposter syndrome. You know, I'm a woman that works with the tech industry, but as a woman in general, I know I struggle with imposter syndrome. I constantly doubt myself. So, and I know that for women, this can really hold them back in achieving what set themselves out to do, and really that kind of full potential of where they want to go. And we've seen some of the numbers in tech, how the female step up into leadership for women in tech can really drop off. So now we know that imposter syndrome can affect anyone, and it's more prevalent among people who are different from the majority of their peers, such as women, and especially women of colour at technology companies. It's something that they really struggle with. According to a study as well by KPMG, 75% of executives have experienced imposter syndrome at some point in their careers. So I think as women, we need to acknowledge the fact that, do you know what, you're probably going to face imposter syndrome at some point in your career, and we shouldn't be fearful of that. I think embracing it is something that's really important. But how have you experienced imposter syndrome in your career?
I think I've experienced it from the beginning, really, of my career journey, stepping into a completely different field that I was never confident in. I thought that I need to be almost like a genius in mathematics to be a great kind of programmer, or understand data, or be able to do a really good job. But the way as per your comments, the way I am overcoming this is trying to lean into my imposter syndrome. It's okay to doubt yourself. If anything, in my experience, it pushes you to be better. It pushes you to constantly develop yourself. And I firmly believe that irrespective of where you are in your career journey, whether you're a woman or a man, you learn every day, and you should learn until the rest of your life, because the field that we're in specifically is changing so rapidly. You almost cannot not feel imposter syndrome, because it's such an evolving field. We change the way we approach problems. The technology and the stacks that we utilize on a daily basis is ever evolving, introducing kind of new developments. I think last time I read, Microsoft, as one of the major cloud providers, is introducing new developments every 7 or 8 days to their tech stacks. It's quite literally impossible to know it all and to be 100% confident. And dare I say that individuals who feel like that probably are missing a trick. So for me, having a bit of a doubt about yourself in terms of different situations and your skills is actually a good thing. And it's important to lean into that and continuously try and better yourself and learn and soak in as much as you can for as long as you can. And I don't think that should stop when you reach a particular role, or you gain like a particular experience, because I've worked with individuals that have twice as many years experience than I have, but actually I still see them to this day as people I look up to in this respect, because they still try and in their spare time they read books about kind of the technology space or about leadership. I can still see them trying to kind of do different certifications, for example, because they need to be able to speak the language of their people and the people who do the work. So I don't think there is a point in time in your career where you won't feel imposter syndrome, irrespective of whether we're talking about your character and how you deal with certain situations, or your skills that you bring in. But leaning into that, really almost kind of driving yourself forward with it on board, is what will keep that kind of hunger, but a level of humility. And I think those are the two characteristics that I'd look for any great team player or any individual and peer that I've ever worked with. Having those in your back pocket, as well as being excellent at, excellent data scientist or an amazing manager, is of equal importance, of being a brilliant person, and creating that people focused culture as well, and across your peers and in your organization.
Really great kind of tips there for anyone listening in. And I love the fact that you're saying lean into it. I think there's a lot of talk around, like I said before, the imposter syndrome and how it holds us back, but sometimes we don't really talk about how to overcome. And I think acknowledging that you are going to face it, and you might face it at the start, the middle, towards the end of your career. It's a constant journey, and it's about evolving with that, which I think is essential. Do you have any specific advice that you would give to any women who are dealing with imposter syndrome right now? They're really kind of stuck in this kind of crippling space where they just feel like they can't step up, they can't go for that promotion, they can't ask for that pay rise. I don't know, they're thinking of leaving tech, which is obviously something that we really need to look to overcome as a whole industry. So yeah, any advice?
I'll say two things. I think making mistakes is okay. And don't be scared of failure. I've learned more from my failures. So I think a lot of times imposter syndrome, if you think about the root cause, like why is it such a big issue for us, is because we're scared we're going to fail. And I think it's okay to being kind of okay with the statement that it's okay to fail and I will learn from it, is a massive step in in anyone's kind of professional and personal growth and maturity. I dare say that I've learned more from my failures than I've learned from my successes. And sometimes I kind of want to fail more than I want to succeed, because um, it kind of builds your character. It builds you in a different way, but also it teaches you about the lessons learned and what you could do different. It just sets you up for success going forward, in a very different way that successes just don't. Because it's very easy to kind of give yourself a pat on the back and say, I've done a great job. And I think the lessons learned are very more positive than what could we have done better in those situations. I think the other aspect of things is talk about it. I think sometimes we tend to, from my experience, and I will put my hands up in there and say that I've done the same, is we internalize when we are having such doubts about whether we can ask for a pay rise, to your example, where we are ready for promotion. Actually talking about it with other individuals and other peers, or your mentors, or even your line manager, if you feel comfortable, is really important, because it doesn't, ultimately, if you position this as coming from a very positive place of wanting to deliver more value to the business, wanting to better yourself personally, of course, because it aids your personal growth, but also aids it will aid kind of the business or the team growth as well. It can become a very useful and also rewarding conversation with your mentor or your line manager. And ultimately, even if the answer is no or not now, it then can drive a very action orientated conversation about, okay, well, what do I need to do to get there? To then give you a very clear plan and structure on what you need to achieve, what are the different milestones or deliverables to get you to the next stage, or to grow yourself. And sometimes growth is upwards, but sometimes growth is also quite lateral and horizontal. So I've seen different women wanting to jump from data science to data engineering, or vice versa. So just talking about it and not internalizing is really important, because most people, in my experience, would be supportive of that if positioned in the right way. They will be there for it, and would really help you understand what you need to do, structure that action plan together, but also give you, probably build a bit of your confidence as well, a lot more than kind of what's coming from within.
They're fantastic tips, and I'm sure for any women listening in right now, they'll benefit from hearing that, and hopefully can take those quite simple actions away to have that confidence to go and, like you said, go and talk about it, and create that action plan to move forward. Shifting gears now slightly, you've accomplished a lot as a leader in the tech space, and something I know that you're also passionate about is the importance of building people first teams and leaving a positive legacy. So, can you expand a little more on what people first means to you as a leader, and how this approach can help in building diverse and inclusive teams?
Yeah, of course. So for me, when we talk about a people focused team, what I always try and do is build a relationship and rapport with the people that I work with, whether they're my direct reports or collaborators, that goes way beyond kind of the professional level. I think we all have personal lives, families outside of work. And a lot of times, what people we tend to forget sometimes in a professional setting is actually our personal life impacts us in different ways and could show up in the way we approach situations at work as well. So building a rapport on a more personal level with your team and the people that you work with is really important, because not only does it build that trust and you're able to talk openly, but also you have a different, I suppose, you understand very different aspects of how people react to different situations based off on their background and who they are and what's shaped their being almost. So I think for me, I place laser focus on spending a lot more time with individuals, not just in a this is what we're going to do, and kind of project setting, but actually understanding their world outside of work. And I tend to be very open-minded about giving them a glimpse of my world and who I am as a person outside of work as well. And in my experience, that builds I don't want to talk about a family necessarily, but I'd say a community in your team. The people feel safe to express themselves. They feel safe to challenge one another constructively, and that's not taken as a negative in a negative way at all. So I think spending time with individuals, really getting them to spend time with others as well and open up in this way, really builds a culture for growing within the team and kind of critically appraising what we do, but in a very constructive and open-minded way. In my experience, Kelly, I would move mountains for the people that I've worked with, but I also know that if I look after them, they have done and they continue to do the same for me as well. And I think what businesses need to realize is that yes, the decisions we need to make need to be business focused, of course, but ultimately, successful businesses are made of and maintained by people. And if you look after your people, they will move your business forward and grow your business forward as well. So I think there needs to be a balance between the business decisions we need to make to protect the business, but also how do we encourage and grow our people? Because if they are supported, the business will naturally grow in the right way as well.
Perfect. And I think what you talk about there being people first, I think leadership over the years has changed so much. If we would have spoken to leaders 10, 15, 20 years ago and beyond, like showing that relationship skills, that vulnerability, that authentic, wanting to get to know someone, it just wouldn't have been part of the skill set. And I think the fact that that's, as a leader, that's something that you value. It must be great environments in terms of the teams, the projects, the work that you're doing, because like you said, if you're going to move a mountain for somebody, they're equally going to give that level of respect back and really show up for you as well in those times when projects need to get done and everything else. So great perspective, and I really love what you've just shared there. What are some of the ways that you aim to develop the potential of your team members and nurture their growth, being a people first leader?
As I mentioned before, so for me, growth kind of comes in different shape, right? Some people aim for kind of upwards growth, so they want to see a trajectory of how can I grow my skills and sort of jump up into roles. Some people want to grow more laterally, and I think it's important to cater for both because you'd naturally have team members that are in different kind of paths and positions in their lives that may want different things. So whilst I've seen a lot of sort of managers and leaders think that everyone in your team wants to kind of go up in their roles and wants to be kind of in higher positions over 6 months, and actually when you start having those personal conversations with people, some may, and that's absolutely fine, but some actually are fairly happy where they are, or maybe they want to position themselves in a different field. And I think it's important to understand that current state and where people are in their different kind of career aspirations or in their life as well, and position, therefore, how you work together to support them in the best way possible. And sometimes that would translate into, as I mentioned, upward growth, and sometimes it could translate into a horizontal one. For me, again, the way I do this is very much thinking about and reflecting on what skills are needed if we're talking about an upward growth to then position yourself well for the position higher that you're aiming for. And I'm very evidence and merit based, I suppose, in my approach. So one of the first thing I tell people whenever I sort of inherit them and they come and report to me is I tend to ask them to start kind of keeping a track of everything that they do and everything that they've contributed to, because it's so easy then for yourself to see how much you've achieved in a particular space of time, but also providing that evidence to the business on how that individual is already demonstrating the skills for the role and the role above that they're aiming for. it just makes building a business case and very evidence-based and very objective, which is what I always try to do in how I support people in my growth. And it's something I learned from someone who used to be my previous line manager and my mentor as well. And it's probably one of the most invaluable tips I've had. The other aspect of things as well is we're talking about skills. We must not forget about how we develop as individuals, like I mentioned before. So more on the kind of soft skills perspective, and where maybe we need to be thinking about growth from a personal perspective and character. So dealing with different situations, stakeholder management, understanding risks, how we can tackle particular situation where we don't have the confidence to speak up. Different people learn differently. I've seen a lot of people prefer to go into different courses or things that we can support them with. But in my experience, a lot of individuals like to see a perspective or a situation unfold in front of them. So the way I've approached this before is I'd bring individuals in different conversations with myself so they can see how I deal with more of what I call a sticky situation, or a situation where I'm challenged, or a situation where maybe we're dealing with failure, so they can see firsthand my response or others' responses and learn from a situation. A lot of people are very hands-on and practical in the way they learn, from my experience. So whilst the theoretical side of things and support, the business supporting those people and going on courses is great, actually really putting them in such situations, but in a very safe space where they can be supported to deal with it, whilst you're there in their capacity, or they can maybe shadow you, is equally invaluable as well.
Definitely. I think that learning in the moment is really great. And there's definitely a space obviously for it, but learning in the moment is something I know that I personally have developed myself a lot in that space, and in the past is how I've developed others around me. So I love all the ideas that you've shared there. For any managers or leaders that might be listening in to the episode and thinking, do you know what? I'm probably a bit more traditional in my leadership style, but I would really love to change my mindset, my leadership style, to be a bit more people first in my approach. Have you got any tips or ways in which they can change to adopt a more people first mentality, and how can they create an environment that truly empowers the team? I mean, you've given some great examples there, but I don't know, you've got some top tips that you would give to someone looking to make that shift.
Yeah. I think maybe, I'm sure all managers and individuals, everyone's got a different style and how they manage. But just to give an example, I do, let's say, sort of try and do weekly one-to-ones with everyone that reports into me. I think purposely, almost in your head, creating an agenda where for 10 minutes you don't talk about work and you focus on, when we do ask, how are you, really asking about how are you, and understanding like what's happening in your personal life, like kind of things that you have planned or going on. And really, it doesn't need to be prescribed in a meeting, but in your head, just carving out the 10 minutes to be thinking about, like, I'm not going to talk about work or projects with this person. I might have half an hour with them. For 10 minutes, it's all about like me and them, as if I'm having a coffee, almost like a virtual coffee, and very informal. That's a way to almost kind of yank it into yourself and do this. The other way, I suppose, is seeking feedback. I didn't mention that earlier, but we are very good at, say, as part of sort of, again, different companies have personal objective setting and performance review. When you're a manager or a leader, you tend to inadvertently be in a situation where you provide a lot of feedback. But not a lot of companies ask for managers or leaders to be asked for feedback, to ask their team members. And I think it's important that, irrespective of where you are in your position, again, irrespective of experience or expertise, I want to see businesses and leaders really doing a 360 feedback. And when we not doing it for their only performance review, but outside of performance reviews, opening up that space. And you know what, like taking accountability if the feedback provided is not what they'd expect. Because, and again, I'd put my hands up in the air as well, sometimes we think that when we reach a certain position, people assume, and we assume, that we're always right. We're not. In my experience, I still make mistakes, and that is absolutely fine. And I learn and I try to kind of grow from those mistakes. But actually, it's very important to create an environment where I can ask for feedback from my team members. And if I've made a mistake, I'd want to be called up on it, not because outside of hierarchy and direct reports, I should be held to account, because I will never be able to grow as an individual and professionally myself further than where I am if I don't create that space and environment for my team. So I don't think that there is such a place and time in your career where you should stop seeking feedback or you should stop bettering yourself. And I think really forcing yourself to create that space, and get written or verbal or whatever form feedback that you're comfortable with from the people you work with and your peers, but also the people who report into you, on how you can be better as a person, as a manager, um, would really help you reflect on and change your practices. Because ultimately, you can't know what you're doing wrong unless you're told, right? But if you don't ask, people may still feel a bit uncomfortable to share and I suppose voice their feedback to you.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think 360s were brought in, and it's hard when it first comes in. It's quite alien. Do your team actually want to give you the feedback that they want to say? Do you actually hear what's going to come your way potentially? Depending on your situation and where your team's at. But if you embrace feedback, and someone said to me, feedback's a gift. It's just how you act on it. So I've always been a big advocate of the 360 feedback, and like you said, we're ever learning, we're ever evolving, and if we don't get that first-hand feedback, how can you evolve, change, learn, and everything else? So, some really good some good tips and advice there for those managers looking to make that shift in their leadership style. That being said, though, building an inclusive, people-first culture, people-first team, it's not going to happen. You're not going to go, right, I'm a people-first manager now, and that's it. Our team, it doesn't happen overnight. And obviously there are going to be challenges, and it's a journey that you're going to have to go on. So what challenges have you faced along the way, and how have you overcome those challenges when building those people first teams? Because also you might be a people first manager, but if the environment you're going into isn't that way, it's a very alien way for those employees to be managed in that sense, because it is completely different. So yeah, what challenges have you faced, and how have you overcome them?
No, absolutely. I think, Kelly, I've been in situations where, I was reflecting on years ago, I did a leadership course, and there was a phrase called, when you're a leader, you should be like a swan. So, as you can imagine, like using a metaphor of a swan, the swan is gliding on the lake. But if you think about under the water, the feet are kind of going really, really fast, right? So, I think there is this. I don't call it prejudice necessarily, because it might have a negative connotation, but there's this expectation that when you are a manager or a leader, you need to be very composed at all times, and there may be a lot going on actually, but you should always be very calm and collected in the way you approach things. And I'd say that that is true for some situations, but actually that there is times and space for this, and there are time and space to be vulnerable and to be more open with your emotions. And actually, like I mentioned to you, for me, because I wear my heart on my sleeve, um, I tend to kind of maybe show my emotions maybe a bit more than I should in different situations. But then that's helped me build that kind of rapport and culture, because I'm human and I make mistakes, and sometimes probably I say a bit more than I should in particular situations. But it shows that vulnerability for me. So I think going into a place where that isn't common can be a bit of a shock for you as a leader, as well as the people you're working with. But ultimately, probably the first thing I'd always do is, and that's why I said that kind of the value of spending time and really getting to know your team members to begin with. Spending some time like talking through who they are as a person, what they care for, what they're passionate about, outside and at work, is really important, because you build that trust And if you've got a level of trust, then you can be vulnerable. And that just changes the narrative from the beginning. So I think for anyone trying to build something, I'd say the first step is carve out time, spend time with people on a personal level. You can talk about work and what makes them tick, but actually talk about what makes them tick outside of work. Talk about their peeves and situations that they faced that they felt unsupported, or they felt they needed more from their previous line managers, or from the environment they were in, and really consciously work on how you can fix that and make it better. And look, I suppose we need to be honest that there would always be certain guardrails. Again, we need to be pragmatic in the decisions we make and the actions that we can do, because we're in a business setting. But being open about that in a very professional way, back to the individuals that you look after, is also equally important. Because ultimately, sometimes, again, reflecting on my experience, one of my first mentors always said, it's very easy to kind of judge and think about how you'd approach situations when you look upwards, 2-3 steps kind of away from where the situation is happening. And I always found, like, I remember reflecting, I was like, oh, I'll do this differently. If I were in this position, I'd just do it so much better than person X. But actually, reflecting back on this, it wasn't that I do it better. It's just that individuals see different things and different aspects of a particular situation. And I think unless a leader opens up to you and tells you all these other things that we're unaware of course you think that there's a better way of doing something, because you only see one side of it. So I think it's on us to keep ourselves to account and give a level of visibility on some of the challenges we see as well, because people would inadvertently continue to be, I suppose, frustrated, and sometimes maybe feel unsupported when the things that we have control over, that they don't have a view of, are go way beyond us, I suppose, as well. So um, again, going back to what would you do, spending that time building that trust and giving them a level of visibility of the kind of challenges that we face, making decisions that might impact them, would help them grow and see a different perspective, that and I suppose foster that trust and that vulnerability as well, for me.
I think, there's some really insightful pieces there that anyone could take away and start thinking about how can they do things differently and start to make that change, or work on what they've already kind of doing within their own work environment. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences. They're so valuable. So yeah, brilliant. And it's clear that, you put a lot of time into developing your teams and developing yourself, and creating the first culture, which is great to hear. We're right at the end of the show now, so we literally are on our last question. So my final question for you, Evie, is what is the most valuable career advice that you have ever been given, or wish someone had given to you when you first started out as a woman in tech?
I'd say find a field that you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. And I don't think that's a coined expression, right? From not necessarily just a piece of advice, but being passionate about what you do just really changes the narrative. It changes how we approach situations. It keeps you in a very grounded yet positive mindset as well. The frustrations that you normally feel are less heightened. And I think we all face challenges in our kind of daily routines and at work, and that's inevitable. There'll always be kind of lows and highs, but the highs feel so amazing, and the successes feel so amazing when you have that passion for the technology space that you're in, that they almost overset any kind of issues and challenges you've had along the way. And I think in terms of kind of, it drives you to grow yourselves, it drives you to grow others, it drives you to collaborate in a very different way. So just my advice would be is that if you almost don't love what you do, that kind of reflect on that and find that thing, find something that gives you the space to grow, but from a very kind of emotionally led and passion led perspective, because you'd never work a day in your life. Yeah.
Brilliant. Love that. Yeah, that's us then. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been really inspiring having a chat to you, talking about growing people first teams, and understanding your secret sauce to really building inclusive tech teams. So thanks a lot for that. It was great having you on today.
Thanks, Kellie. Thanks for having me.